Redditors who like to explore abandoned buildings or places. What's the scariest experience you've had? Don't dead open inside. It's an old reference, but it checks out. In Brazil it once happened that people found our deathly radiation source in such an abandoned hospital. I was exploring this really awesome abandoned Victorian-era mansion turned mental asylum. It had everything: a stone ballroom, indoor fountain, huge staircase at the entrance that looked straight out of Resident Evil, a tower, patient rooms, the works. What made it even cooler was that I had stumbled into the place totally by accident. I had been exploring a nearby building on a whim, and as it turned out it connected to the mansion. I had been in there for at least an hour, maybe more, and I only had a few rooms left to explore. I walk into a big one on the top floor of the place, and the first thing I see is a sign that says something along the lines of warning. Extremely high levels of asbestos in this area. Respirators must be worn. If you have been exposed, go to nearby hospitals or immediately. I immediately sprinted the fuck out of there, threw my clothes in the wash first thing when I got home, and took a really long shower. I also never went exploring again without having a P100 respirator on first. Did you go to the No. I figured it was most likely only for that room, which I didn't even go into. It may have also just been a scare tactic, or at least overcautious, since you need way more exposure than just a few breaths to get significant asbestos damage. Regardless, I didn't feel like admitting to a crime at the same hospital which owns the building. Once you inhale the asbestos fibers, there is nothing you can do. Having said that, you are talking like 1 in 10k exposures actually resulting in mesothelioma. It's generally in people who are repeatedly exposed over a long period of time. Yeah, that sign was for the demolition or building contractors, the guys who are going to come in, clear out this asbestos, then go to another property, deal with the asbestos there, etc., and who risk long-term exposure. A single exposure isn't going to give you cancer unless you literally have clouds of it airborne. Source: my granddad died of mesothelioma in the 90s at the age of 75, because his lab had opened bags of raw asbestos powder that they handled unprotected with bare hands as research chemists at WW2. As long as there hasn't been construction in the area for a while and you weren't ripping up tiles or walls, chances are you're okay. Asbestos is only dangerous when shifted and airborne. Ugh, there goes my tile ripping hobby. I love to explore the abandoned Titan nuclear bases in Colorado. I have had a few really terrifying experiences down there. A link to some pictures are at the bottom. 1. We were held up at gunpoint. While at the end of a really long dark tunnel, we saw a light at the other end. As to not scare the shit out of anyone, we try to make our presence known when we see other explorers. We yelled down the tunnel and they yelled back telling us they were coming to us. When they got there, they all had guns, 3 in total. One had a shotgun and the other 2 small pistols. They told us to drop all of our gear, including lights and phones, and to step away. Not wanting to die in an abandoned silo, we complied. They took everything we had and slowly backed away, guns still drawn. I know the place pretty well because I go down there a lot, but getting out in the pitch black was very freaking and dangerous. If it was anyone else but us, since we knew this place inside and out, they most likely would have seriously injured themselves or even died. 2. In this complex are missile silos that go 10 stories into the ground. Most of them are filled up with water and other nasty shit. Around the sides of these silos are all the old pipes and air ducts hanging off the walls. Being the dumb guys we are, we like to climb on them to get to otherwise inaccessible rooms. My buddy held the light for myself and one other. As we climbed, my friend lost his footing and fell about 30 feet into the water below. He didn't surface for about 15 seconds, the 15 longest seconds of our life. He was able to grab some pipes and climb up to us, and we helped him out. He left everything he had besides his pants and shirt there because we didn't know what all could be in that water. He had cut his leg pretty bad on something in the water and we rushed to the hospital. We got there in time to get the cut cleaned and luckily it did not get infected. We did not tell them we were exploring the silos. We told them he fell at a construction site. I know this was probably stupid, but we did not want to get in trouble. He got a really bad cold for the next few weeks. 3. We like to take people down there who have never seen it and give them tours. We even mapped it out and studied the history of it to give them a real cool experience. We were taking a few girls down there. In total there were 6 of us. We get down into one of the main rooms from which there are multiple tunnels branching off. Right at the entrance to the tunnel that led to the silos, there was a hatch door that had broken off the wall and was laying on the ground. There was a decent sized puddle of blood on it. We touched the blood, with gloves on, and it could not have been more than a few hours old. There were splotches of blood leading away from the puddle. The most unnerving part was that it led deeper into the complex, not out of it. We, being the idiots we were, decided to follow it. It led to one of the silos that did not have much water in it. It dropped about 50 feet into the ground before being too dark to see. The blood was covering the ledge right next to the drop, the rope that chained the drop off, and a bunch of the pipes on the walls. We looked all over for the source hoping that no one was injured. We couldn't find anything, so we noped the fuck out of there real quick. For, I went down there alone once, and only once. Adjacent to the circular silos are these circular rooms that are 3 stories with each floor connected by a ladder. Outside of one of the rooms was a bunch of water filling a tunnel. Something about this water was off. It was much darker and seemed to be more still than any of the other water there. You would drop things in it and though a greenish haze, see them ever so slowly sink to the bottom, sometimes just staying suspended above the ground by whatever the fuck nasty chemicals are in the water. Inside the room on the top floor was this huge demonic painting. It depicted a girl with her ribcage exposed and her organs falling out, forming the head of another girl below with arrows going through it. There were goat skulls and all sorts of creepy shit. I went there alone just once. I sat in that room in the pitch black for about an hour and just listened to the silence. The vibes I got were fucking crazy. Nothing really happened, but I had never felt more hopeless, alone or scared in my entire life. I left after about an hour. Pictures, the silos, album on the web page. Edit, I have pictures of all the blood as well, but they are on a camera at home. I'll try to find it once I am home and upload those for you. That's not blood. It's just thick sludge chock full of red iron oxide rust. You'll see it in almost all of the old Titan complexes. The site in DT has quite a lot of it due to the entire complex having shifted and cracked over the years. Bad ground surveys before the site was even dug. Lots of bentonite in the soil, which lets a lot of water in. Every other Titan site I've been in had it to some extent though. IMGA webpage. Ireland, this is where you get murder eaten by something. I went down there alone once, and only once. How do you put on pants with balls that big? Not even for the spooky factor. But if you had gotten hurt and couldn't move, you'd have lain there for however many days, weeks, months it took for someone else to explore and find you. Out of all these creepy stories, this one is oddly heartwarming. That part actually made me sad. Made me think why he thought that. Maybe it happened before. Who goes around searching for homeless people and hurt them? It's not like it's a hard thing to do, and homeless people have very few places to turn to for help. Sure, it's better in some parts in the world, but there's still places that have people do all sorts of things. I know where I live at. School kids throw rocks at the homeless all the time. I'm just imagining a guy's head with a rolled up carpet for a body. Makes me sad that people would hurt others who are homeless when they are just trying to survive out there with no shelter. The guy wasn't crazy or aggressive. He was just trying to stay warm but was scared. Damn, that's just sad as fuck. When you said train bridge, I automatically assumed this would have something to do with the Goatman. I was pleasantly surprised. On Angel Island in San Francisco Bay, there's an abandoned WWII military base including an old hospital. You can explore the buildings, but the lower floor staircases have been removed so you can't go up onto the upper floors and potentially get hurt. Well, being reckless 15-year-olds, my friends and I decided to boost the most nimble guy up to the second floor so he could see what it was like up there. Apparently it was mostly like the rest of the hospital, except there was a room on the third floor that was padlocked shut and had "keep out" painted on the door. Yes, there was photographic evidence, so he wasn't just messing with us. I have no idea what they'd need to keep locked up on the theoretically inaccessible third floor of an abandoned hospital, and I'm not sure I want to know. Edit. Yeah, it would have been cool if we could have cut the lock and checked it out, but we were on a camping trip so we didn't exactly have bolt cutters with us, and it's not close enough to home for me to easily go back. Sad. Captivating reading for those too lazy to Google. Boy near accident. Wikipedia webpage. Experiments. Dead things. Old porn stashes. I misread that as dad things and was wondering what dad things would be, and why they'd need to be locked away. Old porn stashes. Pay attention. There's an old abandoned mental asylum near where I live which is pretty creepy. It's got a pretty depressing history. History meaning the stories other kids told me. Anyway, the asylum is huge and because it's pitch black, it's so easy to get lost. It's like a labyrinth inside, making it very confusing and disorientating. It smells weird, and is filled with relics from the past, like hospital beds, machines, etc. But the scariest thing that happened to me personally was the last time I went. Me and my friends walked into a dark room, and the entire floor was missing, apart from a small patch directly in front of the door. As I was walking in, I almost fell completely down the hole, which was like a 2-story drop. I was probably like half an inch from fucking myself up. Edit. Tell the people asking if this was in your town. It happened in the north of England. I did something similar once. Was sprinting through a quarry at night, right alongside a conveyor. A catwalk started up next to the conveyor and I thought, hey, that looks easier to run down than jumping over those bushes up ahead. On the spur of the moment I took the catwalk. There was a 100-foot drop immediately past those bushes. Let's back up to the part where you were sprinting through a quarry at night. I had a fair number of adventures while I was younger. Fairly surprised I survived. In this particular case I was sprinting for the pure joy. In an hour I would be sprinting to stay away from the security guard who spotted my friends and me. Sprinting for pure joy in the middle of the night in a quarry? That's pretty cool. Glad you survived though. This wasn't strictly an abandoned building, but my old college campus had a odd building that was shaped like an authentic Scottish castle, down to towers, parapets, walls, etc. Mind you, only the outside was designed to look like a castle, with every room inside being just squeezed in wherever it could fit. So it was already famous for no two rooms being identical, as well as other architectural oddities such as staircases that led nowhere and needing to go up and down a floor to reach a room right next to you. So it was already something of a weird, creepy building. It was used mainly as a dorm, but a lot of it, especially the outer towers and walls, was closed off to the public, so I think those areas should count. And yes, there was a good amount of really weird stuff there. The first time I explored there, I had found a small door that was, mostly, rusted shut on the bottom of one of the rear towers. It was unused, but I could still open it enough to get through, so I came back that night to explore. It led to a small, circular room on the inside of the tower with a bunch of detritus on the floor, like pallets, some old chairs, and a big metal plate. More on that later. However, above me, there was an open square hole which clearly led to another room inside what would be the top of the tower, where a ladder probably had been at one point. I forget how I got up there, probably piled up the aforementioned detritus, but once I got up there, I couldn't believe what I saw. The whole room was filled with hundreds of broken mirror shards, chained together by string and hanging from the ceiling, as well as all over the floor and the windowsills. Also scattered on the floor were what at first looked like dozens of big coins, but on closer inspection turned out to be the metal rims of those cheap little tea candles, stomped flat by people walking on them. Finally, in the center of the room, there was a tiny little table, on top of which was a metal bowl filled with more mirror shards, surrounded by more empty candles. I have no idea what the fuck that room had been used for, but I swear to God it looked like some ritual shit was going down there. I took some pictures with my phone so my friends would believe me, but it was the middle of the night. All I had was a dim flashlight, and phone cameras were shit back then, so nothing really came out that well. More in the reply. That was probably the single weirdest thing I saw exploring there, but the most heart-stopping thing easily came after I came back later and discovered what was under that big metal plate. Apparently, there was a whole system of tunnels, ranging from about 2.5 to 4 feet high, that followed the castle walls all the way around, giving access to many of the other towers, to which I had just found the only entrance. Of course, I had to see what was down there. It was all dirt floor, with lots of metal wires and bars sticking out in random places. Tetanus. Oh, and there I was, crawling around on my hands and knees, holding a flashlight in my teeth, trying to see where I could get to. Some parts Probably the sections under parts of the walls that were used for storage, sort of opened up so that I could sort of crouch and look around at the trash and detritus where students had probably hidden and forgotten things over the years. But I'm a pretty small guy, 5 feet 6 inches and like 110 pounds back then. And even I had to struggle to squirm through some of the passages, which were sometimes partially filled by plumbing, leading me to wonder just what the hell these passages were made for if it's too tight for anyone but a scrawny teenager. Anyway, it was in one of these super tight passages, 5 feet under the ground, that I had one of the most terrifying experiences in my life. Turning around a corner, I saw exactly what you don't want to see in a place like that. Sneakers, connected to a pair of jeans. As I adjusted my flashlight, which again, was in my teeth, it got worse. A red flannel shirt, not empty and lying flat mind you, but very much filled and body shaped, lying in the tunnel facing away, just a few feet in front of me. I don't get scared a lot, but I could feel the color drain from my face just looking at what appeared to be a goddamn murder victim stashed away in some dark tunnel under a dorm to be forgotten. I don't know how I mustered the courage to keep going, but getting closer, it was also clear that it didn't have a head, either. I finally got a good enough angle sneaking by it to see where its head should have been, only to see a speaker membrane under the shirt collar. The whole thing was a fucking mannequin, dressed up like a human, with wireframe arms and legs, probably as some old Halloween prop, hence the speaker. God only knows why someone decided that this of all places was the best place to hide it. I've just never really met the right people to mention it to. I feel like most people would look at me like I'm insane if I said I wanted to climb on top of an abandoned property or building site in the dead of night to take pictures. There was an old flour mill in town which I wanted to explore for a while, but it randomly caught on fire one night and that was that. Coincidentally, it was an old derelict building stuck in the middle of a planned property development site which was old enough that the council didn't want them to demolish it. I was sure this was going to turn into a Loch Ness monster ending. I never thought to check out the lake. I might go back again, but I ain't bringing no goddamn tree fitty. I got to where you said slapping and dragging and immediately thought to myself, this is gonna be a fucking tree fitty story, isn't it? Pleasantly surprised it wasn't. Last one, and this one's much more light-hearted. This was my third night exploring, and I had started to get the lay of the land. I was going through the same tunnel network, and managed to find another similar trapdoor to the one I had come in through, evidently leading to one of the front towers of the castle, overlooking the courtyard. Remember though, that no two rooms in this building were the same. So instead of coming up to an empty room on the inside of the tower, this one led, for some reason, to under a circular stairwell. Fortunately for me, most of the concrete steps near the bottom had long ago been broken away. Otherwise the tower above would have been unreachable, blocked off by its own stairs again. Weird building. I managed to ascend by balancing on the tiny bits of the original steps that were left on the outer wall, just enough to reach the intact upper steps, letting me get to the room above. This one was much bigger than the first tower, and was connected on the inside to a bunch of the outer wall, giving it a lot of big empty concrete walls at odd angles. At first, it looked like just another empty, abandoned room, but as I scanned around with my flashlight, I started to see some weird patterns on the walls, all painted with some kind of dull red ink. Having been less than a week since I found the ritual room the first night, I was almost prepared to believe they had been painted in blood. There were long curved lines, random swirly bits, angular patterns, and what looked like smaller detailed runic shapes, wherever I looked. Again, I had a tiny, dim flashlight, so I couldn't make out any more than a few square feet of the drawings at a time, but they were everywhere I looked. Finally, I turned off the flashlight, pulled out my phone, opened up an empty notepad so it had a white screen, and looked around with the more diffuse, even light, and I finally saw the big picture. The walls around me were covered in massive murals of naked men and women engaged in various sex acts, each figure probably 12 feet high. They were very stylistic, yet also pretty detailed, and looked more than anything like ancient cave paintings in their design. Needless to say, They were also very erotic. Thankfully, with the light I could also see the source of the pigment, a bunch of pieces of brick that had been picked out of the surrounding rubble, scraped across the concrete. I don't know if it was just one or several people who did all that, but it must have taken hours, if not days, of dedicated work coming up there to draw new murals on the walls. Broke into an abandoned insane asylum years ago. We found a number of creepy things. Two stand out. The first one we found when we walked into a random room and shined our flashlights around. On the floor in the middle of the room was a white and red box with a medical cross on it sitting on top of a broken record. Part of the box was busted out and there was some sort of organ inside. Fresh blood had leaked out and was just starting to congeal around the edges. We took a picture. Imga, the magic of the internet web page. The last room of our excursion was a file room. Thousands of patient files had been left inside. Needless to say we took some. We also took a page from a photo album. They were the only pictures we found in there. Later on we were at a diner poring over the crazy stuff we found and my friend takes a look at the pictures only to find that her mom was in 3 out of the 6. Apparently she had worked there a few decades prior. Been exploring all kinds of things for years, on and off. In actual buildings, structurally questionable stairs or floors, you learn to tread carefully really fucking fast, and give things a good eyeball before putting weight on them. Nearly went through a few floors stairwells as a teenager exploring abandoned factories buildings that dated back years, with tunnels and stuff. Bad air is the scariest thing ever. CO2 concentrates in deep spots with shit ventilation. So it's fairly easy to blunder into a place where you find yourself out of breath a lot but still breathing. If that happens, double back as fast as fucking possible. High concentrations of CO2 also tend to elicit a fear response. So if doing tunnel underground exploring and you find you are suddenly feeling extra jumpy and short of breath, back the fuck out. Another scary thing with tunnels and such is the rotten egg smell of H2S. Hydrogen sulfide, which is an absurdly poisonous, smelly gas. If you smell it, and suddenly can't smell it anymore, it's time to get the fuck out to fresh air. The most insidious thing about hydrogen sulfide is that it numbs the receptors that smell it at higher concentrations, and it is easily going to kill you stone fucking dead. Some old tunnels like disused sewer systems will contain this stuff. Finding empty houses that seem to just have been left as is for a few years is always creepy as hell. Also usually smells either funky, musty, or bad. Rotting stuff, food, etc. Depending on the vintage of the house. Only had one experience with abandoned farmland, but stumbling across animal bones while already a bit spooked is sure to get the heart pumping for a bit. While exploring things is never going to be a risk-free endeavor, usually the most risk or the scariest thing is going to be getting picked up by the police or site security. Usually you can talk your way out of these situations quite readily. Just don't get arrested with any tools on you, or else it probably will go south. I have never been prosecuted or charged with anything for exploring physical locations. The worst was threats of prosecution and it taking a few weeks to get my camera back. Some photos for whatever reason, from the police. That incident being entirely my own damn fault too. I was not particularly careful about avoiding being spotted getting into the place. An abandoned shopping center in an urban location, beside a busy road, with CCTV. I live in WI, and there's a place just like this. It's called Northridge Mall. It was planned to be a big, really nice mall, but plans fell through, and it sits completely empty. Every now and then, a local news station will show updated pictures of it that someone sent in. It's fucking cool, but I honestly do not have the guts, or the will to go inside, due to the busy area and CCTV. Broke into an abandoned mansion in my hometown. Place has been empty for as long as I can remember. It stands on a massive property on the side of a busy road, and there is a big lake behind the house. I went in broad daylight. The property and hedges are large enough that I wasn't immediately visible from the road. Broke in through a back window. The majority of the house was dark. Most of the windows and French doors had been boarded up. House was really creaky, like an old ship. There was a lot of really ugly late 60s early 70s furniture. Everything was gold or brown or orange. Found some mail in a front room, all dated around August 1995. So I figured that's when the former owners must have left, for whatever reason. In another room I found a kid's toys, but they didn't look old. They looked like someone had just been playing with them recently. In the kitchen, I found some empty cans of beans that also looked relatively new. And in the pantry, there were urine-soaked sofa cushions someone had been using as a bed. This is when I started to get freaked out, because obviously someone had been there somewhat recently, but they didn't seem to be there. I went up to the second floor. The floor of the upstairs hallway was so warped that it was curved in a rainbow shape, and was hard to walk down. In the last bedroom at the end of the hall, I found a room full of birthday cards. I mean hundreds of birthday cards. They all, in some way or another, were wishing someone named Derek a happy birthday, only that they were all written by the same hand. Most seemed to have been written with the same pen, even. Finally, I went up to the third floor. The hallway was so warped I had to brace myself against the wall. I had barely started when I heard movement from a bedroom a little ways down. It sounded like slapping and dragging. I stood as quietly as possible until a pair of filthy hands came out of the doorway and a man began to pull himself across the threshold into the hall. He wasn't groaning, I can't think of a word, but it was far more aggressive than groaning. I bolted, ran all the way down the stairs and back out the window I came in. I looked back but didn't see anyone following me. This happened in Suffolk County, Long Island back in June 2009. And no, not in Amityville. The mansion has since been torn down and the lot remains empty. TLDR broke into a creepy abandoned mansion. It wasn't abandoned. Edit. Added separate paragraphs. Still new to Reddit's commenting format. Edit the deuce, because so many of my fellow Suffolk County citizens are asking. This happened in my hometown of Bayshore, NY. Sounds like a squatter. It's a good idea to keep some cigarettes or even a pint of cheap booze with you on some sketchy explores, because you never know if you'll meet an aggressive person you need to bribe. This is actually a rather common practice for explorers in really crappy urban environments. That is a good idea. I don't think there would have been any talking to that guy, though. He was clearly severely mentally ill. Also, this is also creepy. I checked all around the first floor for a way in before I broke in that back window. Place was sealed up tight. Either he had some amazing secret entrance, or he'd been in the place since it had been boarded up. Probably Eric locked him in there. I'd be pissed if someone kept sending me fucking birthday cards. But he is Eric. I would have started singing him happy birthday with full gusto, then kicked him in the teeth, shit on him and stole all his cards. Great, except he'd need to go get food. No, it was a spooky ghost. Plus it means a few cool other explorers, they drop booze and cigarettes as loot, are outside. I love the idea of urban exploring, but I've just never done it because I'm always worried that I'll run into violent mentally ill squatters, or even just packs of aggressive teenagers who are there to spray tags or something. Most of my abandoned building explorations have been in Suffolk County. Long Island is loaded with them. I'd recommend going to Kings Park Insane Asylum if you haven't. Update. The radar tower in Montauk is currently busted open so you can actually climb to the top and see the whole town. There's just a few missing staircases that are terrifying to cross, but I assure you it's worth it if you can get down there. Nassau County isn't entirely empty of old creepy mansions either. My mom's aunt had this beautiful estate in Old Westbury that basically hadn't been occupied since the mid-80s. She herself lived in a retirement home hospice until she died, but for whatever reason, she never sold that house and paid a caretaker to look after it. Perhaps she thought she would come back one day, or perhaps it was just unsellable. Probably the former, I bet. I only visited it once, just after she died, late zeros, at 100, and some of her family came to inventory the house, and it was basically an explorer's wet dream. To 11 Wyoming, it was Luigi's goddamn mansion, so naturally I kinda poked around. Everything was as she left it in the 80s. Almost all the rooms were spotless, if very dusty, the garden's empty, a copy of Great Expectations lying on the sofa, fitting, I think. Her Cadillac still parked in the garage, a music roll of Gardens in the Rain still queued up on the organ, and notes written in a pad dated June 1977 reminding her to feed the dog at 11 and call H at 3. My mom waxed not exactly nostalgic at the dining room, where everyone was forbidden from talking during Easter dinner, and at the music room, where everyone was coerced into hearing her aunt bumble through Beethoven. There was a great sadness just blanketing the house, and not just from all the grieving relatives walking around, but also that this house, that had probably seen some Wild Gatsby-style partying and excess in the old days, was the scene of a slowly decaying lady rattling around a slowly decaying mansion, wondering where her husband was. Spoiler, he died sometime in the 70s, while her dog, S, soaked a Persian rug in the east sunroom in so much shit and piss that it stained the floor. You can guess what door I happened to open. I'm honestly not sure whatever became of the house. I'm pretty sure it's been sold, since nobody wanted the house and nobody really had fond memories of visiting the place. My mom's aunt was something of a Norma Desmond-y type, so nobody really had fond memories of her either. It's likely been renovated or replaced with some McMansion. But whatever the case, I hope it never becomes such a depressing shithole. I just posted a story about my KPPC experience, not creepy per se, just the oh shit we almost got caught kind of scary. Broke into building 7 a year ago with a few friends. It's an 11-story building and we went all the way to the top where there's a bunch of mechanical equipment. My friends assured me we were fine and no one saw us as there was basically just grass for as far as the eye could see out those windows. We weren't even there to vandalize stuff. We just wanted to explore. Lo and behold, we finish up, try to go back through the same hole we came in, and all of a sudden my friend motions us to get back in. County police and property security were circling the entire building. My friend had a crowbar which did not help our situation at all, ups it to felony status, so we had to hide out in an isolated room in the middle of the building for an extra 45 minutes, which felt like an eternity. One friend scouted the rest of the building looking for bird's eye views of the cops. I was scouting the first floor windows, and my other two friends were essentially cowering on the floor. After cops finally seemed to have left, we made a mad dash for the hole and left our dust masks behind. Barely made it out of there. We were on edge the entire way back to the car though. On the way back we run into another explorer who told us, hey you guys, I saw police going around so you can't really get in. One of my friends goes, that's okay. We just got out. Instinctually we were all like fuck you. My friends and I went into an old WW2 bomb shelter in some woods when we were about 10 years old. In them we found very explicit drawings in pencil of cartoon characters naked doing sexual acts, like Kim Possible, every Simpsons character and some Family Guy ones too. Your story is the best. I have exactly the same story except it was that one time I stumbled onto Rule 34 on the internet. Same pictures too. Rule 34. I went into an abandoned elementary school with some of my friends once. There was actually a homeless dude jerking off in the bathroom. I was 14 and had never seen a penis IRL before. The school is in walking distance of my house and I avoid it at all costs. Even now. I went into an abandoned elementary school one time to jerk off. Suddenly, these kids walked in and looked at me like they've never seen a penis IRL before. I go back there all the time. I think I saw your penis once. PM me, I'd like to apologize for not knocking. PS. Nice dick. Is this headed where I think it is? IDK where you think this is headed, but I'm headed to an elementary school to get laid. Never thought I'd say that sentence. I think you're probably on some kind of list now. He was not homeless. You came into his coming into his house. You know, that's a good point. I should see if he's still there so I can apologize. If you were 14 he might have, though you were a ghost. Wouldn't be surprised if he never went back either. I too jack off to scare away ghosts. How did they not find you guys? And how did you escape? No scrap metal in a closet. You can never know for sure until you look though. The wall just got 10 feet higher. One summer in college I lived in a house in town with a couple of friends. The town itself was pretty scuzzy away from campus. This is the rural Midwest, so you get your meth heads and what have you. But we were fairly close to campus in an area where students rented, so we didn't usually see much of it. Just rundown old houses that landlords rented cheap. Scariest thing you were likely to run into was a drunk girl puking off someone's porch. However, right behind the house I was living in was an abandoned high school. Big old brick building that had been left up after they built a new one out by the highway back in the 70s. When you went out the back door, you had a little backyard, an alley, and then 3 stories of brick and boarded up windows. It's summer in a little college town, So obviously my housemates and I are drinking a lot and making fast friends with anyone else who happens to be around. One night the four of us, a friend who lived nearby, and a handful of her friends are hanging out on our front porch when one of the friends of a friend starts talking about the old high school. I've wondered about it too, but it looks too well boarded up. But we're a little bit tipsy, so 5 or 6 of us head back into the alley and start trying all the boards until we find one that pulls loose. I should mention that one of the friends I'm with is in the process of becoming a US citizen, and he's totally paranoid about getting arrested and fucking it up. But he's also really susceptible to peer pressure. So we've got someone with us from the very start who's scared shitless and whispering about what a bad idea this is, which doesn't do much for the mood. The first room we go into is a classroom and it's pretty trashed, probably because it's the most accessible part of the building. But when we get out into the hallways and start heading upstairs, it's just a school, a rotting, eerie, quiet school. Desks piled up in some rooms, a few chalk marks left on blackboards, bathrooms where there's still dirty water dripping from mossy, rusted pipes in the ceiling, all of it absolutely pitch dark except for our flashlights. We get up to the 3rd floor and we're almost ready to head back, but there's one more staircase. It goes up to the balcony overlooking the auditorium. The bunch of us crowd onto the landing at the top and shine our flashlights onto the rows of dusty seats. They dip away where the floor has collapsed in the middle. There's nowhere to go but back down the stairs. Of course that's when we hear it. At first my housemate shushes everyone, "It's cops, oh god it's cops." I'm not taking it too seriously, but he's totally panicked. So we humor him. Flashlights off, huddled up against the wall at the top of the staircase, straining to hear footsteps. And I don't think it's cops. Someone is just lazily strolling through the building. No, it's 2 people. Quiet murmuring. We're all scared now. Half these people I only met tonight, but we're all huddled up squeezing each other's hands. The footsteps are pretty close now, and then they stop, like they heard something. You hear that someone says downstairs. I did. Shoulder brought the gun this time. Oh god, oh shit, oh shit. We all make a tight little scrum. I can hear one of my friends whispering a prayer. I have never been so scared. The footsteps sound like they are looking for us now. I can hear them at the bottom of the stairs. I don't know how, but I had this flash of a thought that I'd rather these people know I'm here before they bump into me. I yell out, "Who's there?" and a flashlight beam swings up at us. Holy shit, the voice says. "Who's there?" We turn on our lights and at the bottom of the stairs are 2 particularly shifty looking rednecks. I don't like to be too judgmental about townies, but these dudes looked rough. A couple of my friends are trying to stop shaking long enough to make small talk and defuse the situation. One of them asks the guys what brought them in here anyway. "Oh, we just like to hang out in places like this. There's lots of rats and raccoons, and sometimes we bring the guns and have a little target practice." We got out of there quick and drained a box of Franzia on my front porch to settle our nerves. But the thought of those guys creeping around my neighborhood armed, shooting into the dark, stuck on my mind for a long time. I always go in numbers, and every time we leave a place we assume is completely abandoned, we always scream out, "If anyone is here, let your presence be known." Then 75% of the time we hear a yell or clapping. Then we freak the hell out, then try to convince ourselves that we didn't really hear anything. So, if some crack heroin addict is clapping their hands to make themselves known, you still wondering? Why even ask at that point? I thought they clapped when they left. My girlfriend gave me the clap when I left. It's at that point when you realize you left with one more person than you had with you when you went in. Goatman? Fuck no, get out. Why not yell that before going in? There was a man living in the last one. It was something ripped straight out of a horror movie. He just saw us, rose to his feet and bolted it at us, screaming his head off. If you were sneaking around in an abandoned house, you were the creepy one. Who gets up and runs screeching at a creepy person in their house? Someone smart. Would you stay where you are? There's an old abandoned slaughterhouse outside my hometown my friends and I used to go exploring in. One day during midday we were wandering around the upstairs when we heard people on the main floor talking. Kind of spooked, we quieted down and looked for some cracks in the very old floorboards to try and spy on the people downstairs. What we saw were 3 older guys, older than us, still in high school. They were smoking put off a pipe, and after they finished they entered one of the rooms near the back of the plant, leaving the door ajar. We slowly made our way down the stairs, moving as quietly and as fast as we could. After making it to the main floor, I decided I wanted to see what they were doing, so I slipped away from my friends, heading to the car to try and get a peek. I moved 15 or 20 yards down from the front of the door and hid behind a stack of old planks and gravel. I looked in and could see that they were smoking again, and were fooling with a bunch of containers, some boiling, and with tubes. Holy shit, I thought to myself, we got some real life meth heads here. Then I realized that they probably wouldn't take kindly to my prying eyes and began moving out and back to the car. As I'm moving and trying to keep an eye on them, I knocked over some stuff. I honestly can't remember what. I remember scurrying to try and catch the stuff before it hit the ground. I failed. There was a loud crash, and the fuck was that? I bolted as fast as I could to the car, screaming, "Start the fucking car." I jumped in the car and we peeled out. As the dust from the gravel road cleared, I could see them standing by the door. You have the perfect username for this kind of activity. I went into the old hospital in my city, which has been demolished now. It was huge. Here it is when it was running. Campstime's webpage. Anyway, we went down some stairs, like service stairs, which were metal and obviously the public didn't use when it was open. As we descended, we came across a dark room. We used our torches and looked around. We noticed a small bedding area, and above that on the wall there was spray paint which said, "We are the things that go bump in the night," and we heard this almighty crash. I've never noped the fuck out of somewhere so quickly. There is this small town in the mountains on the way to a ski resort I used to work at and a lot of people go to. It's probably the weirdest town ever. One way in and way out by a bridge over a river that basically surrounds the town. Basically you go there during the day and the place is a ghost town. No one out. Once night falls, you start to see ladies pushing strollers, walking their dogs, etc. There is this old bed and breakfast there that has been abandoned for years. It was built in like 1890 or something like that. It was an inn for families to stay that had husbands that were loggers back 100 years ago. Story goes that there was this girl Alice that had a husband who died logging. She got word that he had been killed in an accident. She proceeded to hang herself in the attic of the inn. Was able to find old newspaper articles and archives that proved this true. A lot of people used to say they saw her walking the halls sometime after she died. Employees that worked the bed and breakfast before it closed in the 90s reported lots of weird things happening. We used to go there and try and scare ourselves. I kid you not. One time we were shining flashlights in the top window, and slowly one of the curtains opened and stayed open for a few seconds, then slowly closed. Note that the top floor no longer existed because it collapsed years earlier. There was no way anyone could be on the top floor. Pretty creepy. We got older and then started going there and breaking in and drinking and whatnot. Experienced many weird noises but nothing that weird. Edit. This is the Bush House in Index WA off of HWY2. I learned they recently renovated it and reopened it late last year. I can't find sources that I had found years ago. They are apparently relics of the internet. The only questionable thing is if the girl's name was actually Alice. Please find and photograph those sources. Put them online so they can live forever. In Baghdad, I kicked in a door in an abandoned building after hearing strange noises. It was about 10 grown men having sex with a young teenage boy. The fucked up part, it wasn't rape. The boy was a prostitute and was pissed off that we had barged in. I kind of think it would be more fucked up if it was rape. Seriously, how would the comment read then? And thank God, it was just rape. I mean, I get the reaction. Not rape, but wedding could use some work. I think it's more fucked up that a young teenage boy would be in prostitution in the first place. It means something had to have happened in his life to get to that point at such a young age. Meaning both the kid and the adults are fucked up. Where if it was some kidnapped raped boy, it's just the adults in the situation that are fucked up. I used to read electric meters for a living way back in the day. One of my stops was at an old high school where the gymnasium had been converted into a broom factory. Since I love history, I asked the management there if I could check out the school itself. It was really cool seeing the vintage 1930s desks and old furnishings, as well as finding musty old books lying about. The scary part was when I came to a classroom where the floor was caving in, a full 6 feet in the center, and all the furnishings had slid into the middle with the sagging. It wasn't really scary until I felt the floor tremble beneath my feet and heard boards cracking, and I never entered it from the hallway. I know I'm late to the party, but this is a true story. I was hiking with some friends in a place near Payson, way north of Phoenix. It was about 11 p.m. and we had gone on a camping trip and were just hiking way out in the pine trees. Two of my friends, mind you, stayed by the campfire. We still swear to this day, that we heard what sounded like those two friends having a conversation. It was so distinct, we almost made out what they were saying. We weren't too creeped out by this at the time. We were more creeped out by the constant feeling that something was in the forest, watching us. We walked back to the campfire, and our friends weren't there. We then walked a mile up to where the cabin was, and they were inside, watching The Simpsons. We asked them if this was some dumb prank, and they were baffled. They had been in the cabin since we decided we wanted to hike. I don't know if I believe them, but that constant feeling that there were three of us in the forest, when I know there were only two, it leads me to believe something fucky was happening. Years ago, me and my friends tried to enter a very old, abandoned psychiatric hospital. It was on a crisp winter morning. Everything was silent. We didn't even heard the birds sing, only the soft sound of our shoes on the mud. We looked up at the massive building. All the windows were broken. The dead ivy almost covered the entire facade. There was only one way in. We had to climb the stairs outside of the building. Then, on the third floor level, we were supposed to go through a hole in the wall. One bad step and we could fall all the way down. But we didn't enter. Through that hole, I saw the clear silhouette of man, with an axe in his hand. I couldn't see his face, but he was definitely looking at me. I told my friend to run, as I saw him coming towards us. We ran away for some time, until we reached the town. Then, after a shaky cup of coffee, we decided to go back. Why? We were super teens, but we stayed outside, on the ground floor. I looked through the side of massive, metal door, and I saw the man again. I could see that he had put some bags on the ground, with metal tools inside. It was pretty obvious. Now, he was looking for copper. We decided to circle around the building one last time, frustrated that we lost our time. But before we even started to leave, we heard the man running towards us, inside the building, and he hit the metal door with his axe several times with all of his force. We ran away a second time. When we came back for the third time, we finally saw him, and I'm glad that he was inside the building, so he couldn't catch us, because if I hadn't seen the bags he had beforehand I would have thought he was some king of axe murderer. I have so many stories about this one building. Good ones, scary ones. There was some kind of bond with it. I'm sure many people on this thread understand. Why did I think it was a good idea to check this thread right before going to sleep? Edit. This does not answer the question, but I wrote it and don't want to delete. Oh man. When I was a kid I used to hang out with a guy from my school, and he one day brought a friend and said we should go explore the nature reserve out back from my house. So we headed in and came to a tree bridge where we could cross over to the other side of this brook. We got to the other side and found a big mud pit. Taking our shoes off we jumped in. Unfortunately we wandered off without our shoes up another little creek. We stayed up there for about 20 minutes until we headed back. However, there was a group of high schoolers sitting next to the mud pit, smoking and drinking. Being 8ish we didn't want to go past. We ended up waiting until they began walking up the creek. We were now trapped between a rock and a hard place. With no shoes we had to clamber through the hedgerow and managed to escape with thorns in our feet. These kids threw our shoes in the brook and we had to fish them out. It was at this moment they noticed us, and began to run after us. Why? I have no idea. It seems pointless and creepy to run after children, but perhaps they got a kick out of it. We then ran back to my house, jumped over my fence and into my house safely. It took a while cleaning our feet and getting the thorns out. We just played some PS2 instead. Sorry if it isn't what you were looking for, op. This was in the attic of a building my friend's family owned that once belonged to Al Capone. But I once followed around a shadow person thinking that it was my friend until I realized he was downstairs and was in another room the whole time. I have never been as freaked out as I was when I heard his voice downstairs. Still refused to go back up there. Completely random. But I kept seeing you on another AskReddit thread. Your username sticks out.